At the annual Victory Day parade in Moscow, President Vladimir Putin claimed the West has unleashed what he called a real war on Russia. In his speech at Russia's annual Victory Day parade, President Vladimir Putin has tried to portray his country as the victim of the West after his illegal invasion of Ukraine. At a scaled-down version of the ceremony, he referenced the 14-month-old conflict and attempted to draw parallels with historical events, promising victory.
Сегодня цивилизация вновь находится на решающем переломном рубеже. Против нашей Родины вновь развязана настоящая война. Но мы дали отпор международному терроризму, защитим и жителей Донбасса, обеспечим свою безопасность.
Russia invaded Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022, claiming it was a special military operation to prevent a Ukrainian offensive against Donbass separatists. Later, Moscow insisted it's more of a global conflict with NATO and the collective West. The United Nations has so far confirmed over 8,700 civilian deaths in the conflict, while the actual figure is expected to be considerably higher.
EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Kiev, and more steps on the road to Ukraine's dream of EU membership. It's a road that's been bumpy of late, with Ukraine's grain exports perceived as a threat by some European farmers. And from Ukraine's perspective, progress in the process of joining has been painfully slow.
Настав час для позитивного рішення щодо відкриття переговорів про членство України в Євросоюзі.
As we stand here today in a country senselessly attacked, some might think it is impossible, improbable, or too distant to talk about a free and peaceful Ukraine in the European Union. But Europe is about making the impossible possible, and so is Ukraine.
But to make the possibility a reality, Ukraine must first complete 7 steps towards accession. PMC Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has again attacked Russia's military commanders, blaming them for failing to provide the ammunition he says is needed to fight for Bakhmut. Prigozhin says the army fled crucial positions in the Bakhmut area.
Начальник Генштаба лично поправил все циферки и уменьшил их в 10 раз. Это очень нехорошо. Если так будет продолжаться, то мы не сможем воевать. Если все задачи выполняются ради того, чтобы обмануть верховного главнокомандующего, либо верховный главнокомандующий вам жопу порвет, либо русский народ, который очень будет расстроен, если война будет проиграна.
The commander-in-chief he's referring to is Vladimir Putin. The Russian president's become increasingly reliant on Prigozhin, who's frequently called for more ammunition and accused the Russian army of sabotaging his mercenaries' attempts to deliver a victory in Bakhmut.
All but 2 of 25 cruise missiles fired by Russia against Ukraine overnight on Tuesday were intercepted by the country's air defenses, the Ukrainian Air Force said in a statement. The Ukrainian military warned earlier this week that Russia is trying to wear down Ukraine's air defenses ahead of an anticipated counteroffensive. Russian forces have made marginal advances within Bakhmut as of the 8th of May amid reports of intensified Wagner Group forces' offensive operations. Russian sources claim that Wagner fighters intensified assaults on Ukrainian positions in western Bakhmut and shelling of the area. Now, Ukrainian military officials reported that additional Wagner personnel arrived and are operating in the city, leading to an increased intensity of the assaults. Ukrainians have not observed any indications that Wagner intends to leave the city, and that intensified shelling likely indicates that Wagner has received more ammunition. The Institute for the Study of War says Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin and Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov may have compelled the Russian theater commander in Ukraine to resume artillery ammunition distribution to the Wagner forces in Bakhmut, despite his desired deprioritization of that effort. Now, the Russian Ministry of Defense likely has not fundamentally changed its intention of deprioritizing offensive operations and conserving munitions across the theater, as the Institute for the Study of War recently assessed. Russian occupation authorities are evacuating from some settlements in Kherson region to areas deep in the rear of occupied Zaporizhzhia region. The Ukrainian General Staff reported on the 8th of May that Russian occupation authorities suspended the Skadovsk area and Skadovsk city administrations and loaded documents, office equipment and other state property for transport out of this area.
In Pakistan, officials from the party of the former Prime Minister Imran Khan say he was arrested on Tuesday as he appeared at a court in the capital Islamabad. A senior member of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party said 72-year-old Khan was detained by agents from the country's anti-corruption body, the National Accountability Bureau, who, he said, dragged Khan out of the court and into a police vehicle. He described the arrest as an abduction. Khan was ousted in a no-confidence vote in April last year. He's claimed the process was illegal and a Western conspiracy and has campaigned against the government of his successor, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, demanding early elections. He faces multiple charges of corruption, but still commands widespread support in Pakistan, which has led to clashes between his supporters and the country's security forces.
As fighting between rival military factions rages on, the UN says the number of people displaced in Sudan has doubled in a week, from 340 to 700,000.
The number of people internally displaced in Sudan has more than doubled in the last week, according to data that's been collected by the International Organization for Migration's Displacement Tracking Matrix. Now, more than 700,000 people are now internally displaced by the fighting, which began on the 15th of April, according to this latest data.
More than 150,000 people have left the country since the conflict began on the 15th of April. At the same briefing, the World Health Organization says 604 people have been killed and more than 5,000 injured since violence erupted.
Police officers in Serbia are being deployed to all 1,800 schools in the country as pupils return to regular classes after last week's mass shootings. More than 2,000 officers are being assigned to patrol in and around school buildings. President Alexander Vučić has also demanded a 90% reduction of firearms in circulation.
Mere su takve da mi od sutra uzimamo nelegalno oružje, kod koga ga pronađemo, a taj ne dostavi, imate mjesec dana rok da dostavite policijskoj stanici nelegalno oružje i nelegalnu municiju.
Bez posljedica.
Bez ikakvih posljedica. Niko vas neće pitati ni odakle, ni kako, ni šta. Samo donesite i ostavite.
Since a 13-year-old boy opened fire on his classmates and a shooting spree by a 20-year-old man last week, there's been growing public anger against the government. There are calls for ministers to quit and for closure of state-controlled mainstream media that promote violence and often host convicted war criminals.
Postoji potreba da se iz korena menja ceo sistem, pa i sistem obrazovanja, zato što sam majka 2 učenika i želim da oni žive u neko bolje vreme nego što smo mi 90-ih i 2000-ih i danas.
Čitavu atmosferu, klimu, što bi se reklo, to je stvorio sistem, odnosno konkretno prvi čovjek je glavni inicijator ove srpske nesreće.
Serbia has the highest level of gun ownership in Europe, with roughly 39 out of 100 people owning firearms.
The Israeli military said it struck Islamic Jihad targets in the Gaza Strip early on Tuesday, claiming 3 militant commanders and members of their families were killed. The Palestinian Health Ministry said at least 9 people died, including a number of children. Local media reports the strikes hit the residences of senior members of the group in the southern city of Rafah. Islamic Jihad, which is smaller than the dominant ruling Hamas movement, confirmed that 3 of the group's commanders were among the dead. The latest attacks come as tension boils between Israel and militants in Gaza. Israel has been conducting almost daily raids to detain Palestinians suspected of carrying out attacks on Israelis in increasing violence in the occupied West Bank. In anticipation of rocket attacks in response, the Israeli military told residents within 40 kilometers of Gaza to stay close to bomb shelters.
Scandals, ideological lurchers, suspicions of cronyism. The image of the Greens as a synonym for coherence and honesty in the German political landscape is crumbling. Robert Habeck, the Minister for Economic Affairs, has been hit by accusations of nepotism against his number two, State Secretary Patrick Greichen, who gave a well-paid post to a close friend. Amid criticism from the opposition, Habeck and Greichen acknowledged that there was an error of form, but not of substance. In a tweet, the Conservative opposition leader said, "Official clientism and nepotism may be corrected, but the damage to our country will not be repaired so quickly." The opposition's also attacked legislation passed by the government to ban individual gas and oil heating in new construction. In a statement that betrays his doubts, the Minister of Economics has indicated that it's likely to come into force later than originally planned. Many Germans are also angry about the fulfilment of an historic promise, the shutdown of nuclear power plants. In a context of energy shortages linked to the war in Ukraine, many politicians and citizens would prefer to prolong the power stations' lives. A few months ago, the government gave the green light to the controversial exploitation of the Lützerath coal mine in a gesture that did not please their ideological bases. The polls reveal that if elections were held today, the Greens would have about 16% of the votes and could cede their third position to the far-right AfD.